When I look at a situation like this, I think it's always incriminating for the dad first and foremost. But beyond that, sometimes you'll see a situation where kids, presumably of a different mom or dad, as the case may be, will maybe grow up with hostility.
Welcome to Life's Third Act, an enlightening look at estate planning, retirement, and beyond.
So let's talk more then about how your relationship with your dad kind of, well, how it developed and how it receded.
Well, my parents had a very bad divorce. And my mother, she also maybe had some mental issues too. And she was very immature concerning the divorce and really kept me away from seeing my father. She did not keep me away from my grandparents, which is great because they would sneak me to see him when I was young. I don't even really remember it, but they would do that. And then at one point, by the time that I can really remember, I wasn't seeing him. And probably by the time I was 4 or 5, I didn't see him.
For how long?
Well, I saw him in 75 when at the hospital. And
It's a big gap.
it was a huge gap. But my mom had remarried and had kind of put me into another family. And it was, it, I was not even allowed to say the name Everly. That I was under the fear of my life. I was not allowed to say the name Everly.
Well, did you use that name though? Like when you went to school, were you known? No?
No, I did not. My mom gave me the name of my stepfather, who became,
Which was also another music family
Yeah.
in country.
yeah, and it was just kind of, it was hard, because I kind of lived my childhood kind of, scared someone. I thought if someone would find out that I was really an Everly, but I didn't know that everyone really knew it and just didn't say it, in the other family. It would,
Let's talk for a second about this other country family. So tell me about your stepdad.
My stepdad was a songwriter named Glenn Tubb, and his uncle was Ernest Tubb. And so I grew up with the Tubb family from the time, I was 4 years old uh, until a teenager when I took my name back.
And what was did he have success financially, your stepdad?
Well, on and off. He had some hits, but he had problems with alcoholism, and our life was pretty on and off financially. We were up and down.
So no one knew you as an Everly growing up.
I have a cousin, my cousin Capri, who I was so close with. She didn't find out till she was a grown up that I was really Venetia Everly. And this is someone I was around. That's how buttoned up I was, is I did not tell anyone anything. I didn't know who to tell because I knew my mom would have a fit if she knew that I had told anyone, because she wanted to wipe it out as if it never happened.
Were you ever like with your father, with him knowing that you changed your last name
No.
back and forth?
No, I had, after my mom passed, I found a box of letters that he had written to me and, in the 70s, and about spending some time with me and wanting to work with my mom and things. Of course, I found them after my mom passed. I also found another thing that after she passed was that my father had sued for custody of me when I was 2 years old. And that it sounds strange to find that special, but I did. I was like, it made me feel really good that he
Yeah, and
did,
that your father wanted you.
because this whole thing has happened, has made me feel not wanted with my dad's estate, not wanted, not seen.
Well, let me ask you, what was his relationship though with the other three children from the second marriage?
I can't really speak for them, but he was not around, he was not around for anyone
He
really
showed
in the
lack of
70s.
interest. Let's just say that lack of interest for them as well.
But I mean, I think that everybody's had their own different times with him. So that, I can't speak for them and I won't speak for them because, they had a different situation, but Father of the Year for no one. So,
Yeah, yeah. But you wonder to some extent, when I look at a situation like this, I think it's always incriminating for the dad first and foremost. But beyond that, sometimes you'll see a situation where kids, presumably of a different mom or dad, as the case may be, um, will maybe grow up with hostility, having had that instilled in them, perhaps by a step parent. And so in that case, maybe the dad may go out of this world without having had much of a relationship with the kids. But I feel like, a mitigating factor is if the kids really said they hated him, they didn't want anything to do with him. But in this case, what strikes me as odd, I haven't seen that anywhere among the four of you. And I know you're not speaking for them, for the other three, but in my reading, it seems like your dad just didn't he had kind of moved on mentally in some ways. And we'll get to why I think you and many of us think were important factors in that. And that was, the person that he was married to at the end. And we know that stepwives or stepmoms, that they sometimes do affect those relationships with children. So I did want to drill down and get a sense for, as much as I could, for his relationship with you all before he met his last wife and who is his surviving widow.
Uncle Phil would arrange for us to all get together in the 80s after the reunion, and we would go out to dinner, but there wasn't any, personally for me, I wasn't speaking to him without a big group of people around. I never felt like I knew him as a person in those years.
But he never reached out. And again, I'm talking about before 97. 97 is when he married Adela, who we'll talk more about. But prior to that, how long had he been with Adela before that? Was that pretty recent?
I don't know. I've heard differing stories. There was a few girlfriends, and my understanding is that this relationship just sort of rose to the top, but that there were quite a few relationships. They might have met I've heard some people say they met in the late 80s, and I think
Something
that,
that is known though is that they definitely scared off the other women that
well,
he was possibly speaking with. And that's been mentioned by multiple people. Just the fact that they have had issues with the law before, and so they are very intimidating as individuals. And so there are many people out there that are just they don't want to deal with them or speak on them. So
So for our listeners, when we hear the word they, so we're talking about the fact that these were identical twins, are identical twins. They're both living. So we will spend a significant amount of time talking about that relationship, which we'll say officially started at least in 97. At least that's when they married. So again, let me circle back and then we'll move forward. So prior to 97, though, did your dad initiate any communication with you, or to your knowledge, your sisters, or your half sisters?
and half brother. Not to me, but I do think that maybe one of our half sisters did have a relationship with him somewhat. My understanding is they lived in Nashville for a little bit, but it didn't work out. So I don't know. I really don't know. My half brother, he played with them a little bit, and I don't know where
As
that
a
went.
musician, you mean?
Yes. And I don't know where that went either, because that was just a very short period. The only time I would see him would be at a show in the 80s. I think I saw him in early 90, maybe at a show. And but nothing else. Oh, well, actually, I did remember one thing. He did actually try to contact me in the 80s one time. I was visiting Nashville, and my grandmother had told him I was staying at a hotel. I was living in California at the time, and I came back to visit, but I'm back to Nashville. He called and asked me to go see a show with him and to come see him record.
So you did not, but you didn't accept.
I didn't, and that was because of my mother. And
But at least it showed an attempt.
It did.
So, and you were over age 20?
Yes,
You were-
I was in my mid-20s, and I really, looking back, I should have done what I wanted, but, you know,
You didn't want to hurt your mom.
no,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said a bitter divorce, so
very bitter, and she never got over it. He was the love of her life, and she, that was over everything. So,
Obviously, it hurt her to the
Yeah.
point where she was cutting his pictures out of. Yeah.
oh,
That was
I have
awful.
no childhood pictures with my dad because my mom tore them all up.
Yeah, alienation is a terrible thing. And with Cordell and Cordell, that's a common issue at the divorce law firm that, there's a lot of alienation, particularly with the parent who has custody. If you don't have 50-50 custody and one parent has primary, and historically that was mom's, um, it really produces an opportunity for that sort of alienation I mean, this is textbook what you're describing here. It doesn't mean Don didn't have a lot of flaws. I mean, he did, but anyway, and with respect to your half siblings, you don't know of any animosity on their part or resentment or refusal to communicate with him.
I don't know of any, no. From what I see, it wasn't, we had someone else to compare as our Uncle Phil with his children, and it wasn't that. And because my Uncle Phil was a really good father, and I think I would have known if, I will speak for all the children in the fact that I'm sure that we were all, hurt by him, but, I think that we all loved him.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much he knew that. And um, still, I think that the obligation is always on the dad to initiate, to make the effort. Now, he may argue he did that in the 80s with respect to you, maybe. But so this will make more sense to people viewing this as we move along the timeline here. And RJ, one thing I'd really like to get your thoughts on is how these recording rights work. I mean, I'm not a copyright attorney. I know a little bit about it just because I've been doing these shows for so long, but I don't deal with it with clients. We don't have people in the music industry or the arts. Just to talk about, I know it's going to come up later. We're going to, the fact there was some changes made to the codicil on this codicil that affected how these rights were transferred. So some people would find it very interesting to know a little bit about this income related to that sort of asset. Do you have any much familiarity with that?
like ASCAP and NASCAP, and if radio stations play their music or Spotify or whatever, do they get any money from that or the family?
Yeah, absolutely. It's BMI and ASCAP are the primary collection agencies. There's mechanical royalties, there's radio airplay, there's, if it's used in a commercial or, it's, then you got the publishing of the original songs. I mean, Don and Phil both had, a couple of massive big records, When Will I Be Loved and Kathy's Clown and a few other ones. Those generate a lot of money. So if you take these companies like BlackRock or Hypnosis or a Universal Music Group Publishing, or they pay what's called a to buy the copyright for the ownership of the copyright. They will pay 15 to 20 times the multiple of what that song is worth based on what it's going to be worth 25 years from now or 20 years from now. It's not worth that technically, but they're paying, it's like a futures bet. You're going to just buy it and then it'll be worth the money. It keeps bringing in the money. And a really good example for you is Stax Records here in Memphis. Well, they got in trouble financially, ended up going bankrupt around 1975. They owed Union Planters Bank $300,000. Well, the president of the bank was Mike Matthews, and anyway, somehow with the bankruptcy judge, they were able to sell the catalog to pay off the bank debt and through the, I guess, the bankruptcy trustee. So they shopped it to Columbia. They were interested, but Fantasy Records, which was started by Creedence Clearwater, they had made so much money that they had the juice to buy it. So they bought it for $300,000 in 75. Today, that catalog is worth over $50 million. So that's just these things just keep generate. If the quality of song there, it just will generate money.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists now, like young artists that are getting rid of their music like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Dylan did his. I think Dylan got 500 million. Bruce Springsteen 500 million. I mean, that's Rolling Stones are going to do there soon, but they're holding out for $1 billion. Jagger's holding out. They've been offered 800. They've been offered 850. But the rumor I hear from strong sources that they're holding out for a billion. So
And in this case, though, we have guys who between in this 5 year period, we'll call it 4 year period, cranked out like 30 hits or so, and I don't at least 10 of those were top 10. Isn't that right?
I don't know the exact numbers of how many were in the top 10. I'd have to
Yeah.
look it up. I know they've sold around 50 million records, you know.
as far as the Everlys go, like those original hits, that unless there was a side deal that they got a little piece of the publishing, this happens a lot. I mean, it happened with Meatloaf. Meatloaf was a friend of mine. I was actually producing Meatloaf's farewell album when he died from COVID. He cut a deal with Steinman, who wrote all the songs from Bat Out of Hell and all that. He cut a deal where he got a third of the publishing. So that's not like owning a chunk of the song. So he actually did a side deal because he knew he was going to make, without him, the songs wouldn't be successful because they were specifically written sort of in the theater rock genre that he was in.
Yeah, nobody else could do those songs and it
Yeah.
wouldn't
No,
succeed.
but he was a smart cookie because he was able to say, hey, we're going to do this deal. But he was making money off the songs, but he wasn't a writer. So, but his interpretation of the songs was well worth giving him that piece of the act.
But in this case, we have the singers, the performers who they did not write any of those top 30 hits, did they?
They did, with Kathy's Clown being one. That was a number one.
Okay.
And it was that was written by
Till I Kissed You.
Until I Kissed You.
So
Yeah,
sad.
So,
Yes.
quite several of the top tens were written by them. I was thinking of this couple with this second movie, the second recording contract that they had.
Well, yeah,
I was-
that's kind of golden era stuff. The kind of
Well, Boodle and Felice, like Bye Bye Love got him out, got him up out the door. And then they, followed up with Wake Up Little Susie, and those were both Boodle and Felice.
and Bird Dog was a big song too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's one of my favorite ones. I love that song.
yeah.
But they were writing before, this, and then maybe their songs, they started looking to put them on the records and the albums or whatever, and they were getting better and better. And Uncle Phil's first song was When Will I Be Loved, and it, that's been a hit for a lot of people.
Well, Linda Ronstadt cut it first, and she sold about 10 million copies of it. So it's there's some really juicy income on all those songs, but also too, if say for example you had a Everly Brothers album from 1959 and it's got six Boogaloo Bryant songs on there and two kind of sleeper songs on side B, it doesn't matter. The record's still going to sell and you're still going to make the amount of money. But one of the chains of money flows, you're not going to get the performance royalties because somebody buys it and plays it at home and it's not being played on the radio or television, you're not going to get that portion of the income. You're only going to get the record sales, which is still a lot.
So, I mean, I would say the performance is not as important as the songwriting. The songwriters have really
Yeah.
hit
Yeah,
their
so-
cut.
So there may be, I haven't investigated in a while. I used to know a little bit more, but I'll dig out my albums and look on the records and see how many songs but they may have had, a handful here and a handful there. I mean, Kitty Wells, I mean, they've had some of their songs covered by a lot of different people.
What about the documentary? What do you know that was included with that? That it looks like it's the footage is held from Andrew Solt. 2016, the information that I found on that was that, there's a documentary out there about your father. However, the footage has not been released.
Yeah, I believe that's in the works, and I believe that my lawsuit may have held that back, and that's probably, I think because that was kind of holding things back a little bit, not purposely, but I think that maybe my father's side that's in control probably didn't want to move forward with anything while I was contesting the will, and I think let me move forward now because I had to drop my will contest.
So I want to circle back and finish up this little segment where we're talking about the intellectual property. So then it's probably safe to say that there certainly is the most compensation that's being paid in terms of royalties would be where the Evers brothers or one of them was actually a songwriter, as well as getting paid for the recording and publishing rights, et cetera. And so we know there are some of those, but then there are others where that were big hits, but they didn't write them. And in those cases, that as you indicated, RJ, they would be paid every time it's played.
So the artist royalty, so the intellectual property, the visual, the haircut, the album cover, jacket, all that plays into the
Yeah.
intellectual.
Brand and imaging. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, but anytime a reissue comes out, whether it's digitally online or CDs or cassettes or even reissue vinyl is big now. I mean, Concord Music Group is just pressing it left and right, so it's still bringing some income in. You combine all that together, and then they're getting money off jukebox sales now too. And then Spotify is bringing in dough, and Apple Music, and all these things add up. The pennies add up. In the old days, I think it was you got maybe 5 cents for every time your song was played on FM radio. Well, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you got 500 stations across America playing it 20 times a day, those nickels
Yeah.
add up really fast.
They sure do.
Your music comes from a time where they also were able to recapture the publishing on it, and I I know that my father had recaptured his publishing, and that was what if he had passed when the publishing hadn't been recaptured. My understanding is that in DC, Washington, D.C., that the monies would have been separated amongst his widow and his children, despite what it would have been on a will. This is my understanding. But because he had recaptured the publishing, he owned the publishing and could will it as he wanted. And I just to say that was a large hunk of money too, like because when you keep your publishing with a record label or I mean a publishing company, they may not be using that. They say that instead of being 100%, a record is 200, right? And then the publishing is 100 and the writing's 100.
Yeah,
And
or 50-50. It's
oh,
a
yeah, if you look at it that way, but yeah,
pie
yeah,
cut in half,
yeah.
so, you know,
So he got that back, and I didn't mean to interject that, but I just wanted to mention that.
No, that's fair. And then it's I think it's the Sonny Bono law, isn't it? That apparently since passage of the Sonny Bono Act, in which Congress decided that it was unfair, that artists were notoriously victimized by, very, very savvy businesses and managers in the industry, and they wanted to give families an opportunity, or the people who would inherit their rights, an opportunity to renounce a contract that would otherwise could have been, and was at one time, a lifetime contract about how they're paid in terms of both publication, performance. So now there's this period of time that the family has to actually claim that and to reject the original contract. And that's what you're referring to as recapture.
Mhm.
So it's a fascinating subject, and it was worth taking a few minutes to talk about. And we don't know the details about Don's estate because we know that he had a trust, and we'll talk more about that. But I still want our viewers to be able to kind of understand the big picture of why the intellectual property rights, the rights related to the creation of this music, is still a big deal and is often the primary asset in the estates of celebrities who are in the arts.
We hope you enjoyed Life's Third Act, sponsored by Cordell & Cordell, your advisors for estate planning and beyond. Subscribe and join us weekly for thought-provoking discussion and topics exclusively focused on estate planning and your financial future. Discover more at CordellCordell.com. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.